You're 57 years old, you've got $1.3 million saved, and you want to know if you have enough to retire. Let's find out. Welcome back to today's video. My name is Jarrett Lang, Vice President of W.A. Smith Financial, and we have one goal. Our group of advisors is here to help you achieve financial peace of mind. Let's jump right into today's case study. Okay, as we said, we have Bob here. Bob is 57 years old. Let me tell you a little bit about Bob. Bob has been a blue-collar worker and a laborer for 35 plus years. Phone company guy. He's been with one company his entire career. He's single. He has 2 kids. He is not married right now, and he has one main goal, and that's to retire. He wants to retire right now. He's 57, and we could deem that as retiring early. Right? There's a lot of definitions for what is early retirement. Well, retirement means different things to different people, but if you retire prior to age 59 and a half, that's before you're legally eligible to take money out of your qualified retirement plans without being penalized, then we could call that early retirement. If you say it's before age 65, which is normal retirement age for a pension plan, maybe that's early retirement, but work with me here. We'll call this early retirement for Bob. A couple of other things about Bob. Kids are important to him. He has some grandkids, but he does not have a legacy goal in mind. We talked about this with Bob, and Bob's goal is, I'm gonna worry about me first. I've given my kids enough. My kids are more successful than I ever was. They have more money than I have today. I wanna leave them something if there's any money left over. And I, of course, wanna take care of my grandkids, but I'm not overly worried about factoring them into my plan. Okay, so take care of me first, make sure that the money lasts for me. And by all means, if I die and there's money left over of this 1.3 million, then certainly I want my kids and my grandkids to get that in the most tax advantageous way, okay? Bob also has a worry about long-term care. So Bob's dad went into a nursing care facility where he was there for multiple years. He watched it drain his retirement savings. He helped his dad. It was a really rough period of time, and Bob really doesn't want to put his kids through that. So that's a major concern of his. Outside of that, Bob just wants to have enough income on a monthly basis to live his life comfortably, and that's where the $7,000 a month comes into play. We asked Bob, hey, Bob, think about all the things that you have to spend money on first. These are your basic expenses, things like your mortgage, things like taxes, food, clothing, shelter, utilities, bills, right? You always will pay them. Some of those are extinguishing basic expenses. Bob just so happens to have no debt. He's paid his mortgage off. He doesn't have any credit card balances. He doesn't live paycheck to paycheck. He stashes a little bit of cash and saves it in retirement vehicles in his checking account and his savings account. So Bob's sitting pretty good financially speaking. But yet he's still asking the question of, do I have enough money saved? 1.3 million in today's world, mind you, with inflation where it is, with cost of living increases, with taxes potentially going up in the next X amount of years. Does Bob have enough? Can he invest it properly, 1.3 million, to have it pay him $7,000 a month in retirement? That's his number one goal. And he's wondering, as that $7,000 a month increases over time, how do I attack that, right? So now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna walk you through exactly what Bob needs to do to determine if he has enough money to retire first. Remember, Bob's goal was $7,000 a month when he gets to retirement. He's 57, he realizes that he's saved a lot of money and that he's done a pretty good job, but he's still asking that question of, do I have enough money? First, we're gonna look at resources, and this is the first step that I would have anyone do. First step, actually, let me back up a second, is do you know how much you spend? Well, Bob took a long, hard look at this. $5,000 of that $7,000 a month, that's his basics, things he has to pay for. That's just to maintain his normal standard of living. But in retirement, when all of the sudden Bob has all this newfound time on his hands, every day feels like Saturday to Bob now, he wants to do some golfing. He wants to do some travel, and he wants to go on some fishing trips with the friends. He wants to visit and spend some time with his grandchildren. They don't all live close to home. So Bob has determined that In addition to his $5,000 a month that he needs for basic living, he wants $2,000 a month of spending cash to do those hobbies and those things that got him to retirement, those things that he wanted to strive for in retirement. Hence, $7,000 a month. Now, Bob did not have a pension. His employer didn't offer a pension. It was defined contribution, 401k. We've got other videos, check it out in the link, and you can see some other examples on our channel about how to look at your 401k plan properly and what you should be doing there. But Bob saved all of his retirement money in a 401k plan, where the vast majority of it is there. So he didn't have a pension, but he does qualify for Social Security. Now, Bob cannot get to Social Security at the earliest until 62. And according to his benefit statement, Bob will be able to collect roughly $1,600 per month from Social Security, and that is the only check that he is going to receive in retirement unless he chose to get a part-time job or to gather some passive income in some fashion. Bob doesn't have rental properties, he doesn't have real estate that he can draw off of. So there's the predicament, right? We've got Bob, who wants $7,000, has $1,600 a month coming in, but not for another 5 years. And in 5 years, once that paycheck's coming in, he will be short still $5,400 every single month. And Bob will need that pot at the end of the rainbow that has $1.3 million in it to create that. See his predicament? Now, how do you know, in a simple format, at least a starter check on this, that $1.3 million is enough to create a $5,400 a month paycheck to cover Bob's gap? Well, we can do a pretty quick and easy calculation. Okay, I'm back. They ran to Staples to get me a calculator. That's good. So now we got the calculator. First thing you can do, we've heard about withdrawal rates before, and this is just a percentage of a calculation. So what we could do is we could say, hey, Bob's got 1.3 million. Well, first of all, 5,400 times 12 months, there's 12 months in every year, is $64,800. Well, let's just round it up to 65,000. This is $65,000 a year that Bob has to pull out of 1.3 million. 65,000 divided by 1.3 million, he's going to be pulling about 5% out of his portfolio as a withdrawal rate every single year doing that. So we've got our first test here. There used to be, and there still is, a rule that says don't take more than 4% out of your portfolio every year if you want to make inflation adjustments to your income, and you have a pretty good chance that you won't run out of money for over 30 years, and that's how they always did all the Monte Carlo simulations and all that. Well, I'm here to tell you that this is a working number. 4% is not a rule. You could even argue it's not a rule of thumb anymore. It all depends on how Bob does the investment plan and the financial plan for his 1.3 million. What's Bob's risk tolerance? Does Bob have legacy goals? We talked about that. He doesn't really worry too much about what he leaves his kids. In his eyes, actually, Bob might say, hey, if the last check bounces as I breathe my final breath, I'd be a happy man. So you got to think about the parameters here. But we've got our first test, and I would say that in another video that we've done on the page or on the channel, red light, yellow light, green light, Bob's light is maybe a little yellow, but it's mostly green. We have to make sure we do the right things in his investment plan and his financial plan to make this work. I just told Bob that the plan is tight, right? He's yellow, but mostly green. And Bob thought, wow, $1.3 million, that's a lot of money. I thought I'd be in really good shape. And when I analyzed it with him, I said, listen, if you've got a nest egg of 1.3 million and your plan is to pull $65,000 per year out of there, yes, that represents 5% per year in the form of withdrawal. But what we haven't talked yet about is Uncle Sam and the IRS and the cut that they may have on the money that Bob is pulling out of his portfolio. Let's break down the assets here. Of that 1.3 million that Bob has, a good portion of it is qualified money. Qualified money means that when you take a withdrawal from the account, you owe federal income tax, and depending on your state of residency, you may or may not owe state income tax on the distribution. Most of Bob's money $1 million of it is qualified. Remember, I told you that Bob saved most of his money in a 401k plan. So it was mostly defined contribution, deferring his pay before it was taxed for income into the plan and amassing a very large retirement nest egg that way. He did later in life find a way to stash away $300,000. Some of that is in his bank account, which has already been taxed. We call it non-qualified money. Some of that is in a brokerage account where he is investing in stocks and equities and mutual funds on his own. Okay, so there you have it. There's the $1.3 million breakdown. If Bob needs to take $65,000, we can guess that a majority of it might have to come out of his qualified money, which means that now we have to factor in a tax assumption for Bob. Using $65,000 now as a distribution amount plus the amount he takes from Social Security, we could use whatever the tax brackets are in the here and the now, and we could make an assumption of how much tax Bob might owe on a distribution from his qualified money. For today, we'll use 15% federal and 3% state, total of 18% tax withholding from the account. So if Bob needs $65,000 a year and we take $65,000 and we divide that by, we said 18%, so 0.82, then $65,000 quickly becomes $80,000 that Bob has to take out per year. This is gross. This is the tax coming out of it to get to the $65,000 net. Following me? So $80,000 a year now coming out of $1.3 million is a 6.2% rate of withdrawal, which is why Bob's a little worried now, okay? Now, we can take this one step further, and the one thing that we haven't done yet is talked about Bob's phases of income. This is one of the first steps that we'll take someone through. After having this conversation with Bob, we started getting realistic. And I said, hey, you know, it's somewhat tight. If you took that $1.3 million and you invested it, and let's say you put it all in the market in some way, shape, or form, in varying sets of asset classes and industries and levels of risk, and this portfolio that you amassed, that you invested, averaged a 6.5% rate of return per year, Bob's gonna be in pretty good shape. His distribution withdrawal rate on the last example here was just under 6.5%. So technically, if his portfolio makes 6.5%, he would be living off of the interest for at least a period of time until inflation would affect his income need. And he would be growing the portfolio versus depleting it, even though he's taking $80,000 a year out. But that isn't always how it works. And Bob's risk tolerance is an issue. When talking to Bob about risk tolerance, he has a more conservative or a lower than average risk tolerance. Bob really doesn't have much of a stomach for risk. He can't sleep well at night when the markets go crazy. In 2008, he was a wreck when he saw half of his 401k get washed away. Luckily, he stayed the course and he was able to recoup that and then some and enjoy a really long bull market afterwards, which got Bob to where he is today. But he doesn't want to go through that again. I asked him, I said, hey, you know, how do you feel about risk? How would you react to something like that in the markets? And he says, I just can't deal with that again. I've already done that once or twice in my life. So respectfully understanding Bob's risk tolerance would be a concern if we were to invest this way. We have to take an alternative approach. And this is where the idea of risk capacity comes into play. Risk capacity says that we are going to try to define how much risk in his portfolio allocation Bob can afford to take, while still having enough money in a more conservative place to ease his worries about long-term investments in the market and seeing another market recession or something of a 2008-like mirroring instance happen to him. Draw a T-graph if you're taking your notes on your page here. On one side, we're gonna put an S down for safety or more conservative, and we're gonna put an I down for income, safety and income, or you could say, hey, we'll put a C out here for conservative. Depends on how your risk tolerance plays out. On the other side, we're gonna put a G down for growth, an L down for liquidity, and an I down for income. There are only 4 or 5 things you want your money to do for you. This goes for everybody. This is you too included watching this video. We all want our money to be safe. We don't want to lose it. In my 15+ year career here, I've never met somebody that says they like losing money. So we all want it to be safe. Of course, we all want it to grow. If we're going to put it somewhere, we want to have more of it and we want it to grow. We all want it to be liquid or accessible. We want to be able to get our hands on it without any kind of penalty or waiting period. Eventually, we're all going to need income off of it, because if you're like Bob and you retire and now the paycheck from work goes away and you have to replace that paycheck with income from the portfolio, you need income. So we're going to split these needs for our money into 2 different categories, because I hate to break it to you, there is no singular investment that exists today that does growth, safety, income, and liquidity. Not one. I've never seen an investment that exists today that does all 4 of those things very well. We wanted to get technical here, and this is where we could bring our colleague Jerry Masisak in. We could talk about tax efficiency as another one that we're looking for in our investments, but let's keep it somewhat simple today. Our goal now is to help Bob define how much money should you have on the left side of your $1.3 million here. How much do we need to protect? How much do we need to be a little bit more conservative? And how much of that money can produce income? Remember, Bob needs $80,000 a year from his portfolio in 5 years' time when Social Security kicks on. Unfortunately for Bob, it's even worse right now from age 57 to age 62, because he can't turn Social Security on just yet. Bob has another problem here. He's not yet 59.5 years old, which means that if he takes money out of his 401k, he could be penalized. Luckily, he's retiring after age 55, so he'll avoid that penalty, but we got a lot of moving parts here. Ultimately, due to Bob's risk capacity, he decided that he wanted to have about 50% of his portfolio in a safer place. And then if he had that protected, he'd have 50% in his portfolio that he would be comfortable taking a risk with. So taking the 50-50, we've got $650,000 in Bob's choice on each side here. $650,000 in today's market here might generate a decent little interest with where interest rates are. We could expect, if he's investing on the conservative or even the principal protected side, that Bob could expect 4 to 5% annually on his money there. Not too bad. Over here, we could invest even more aggressively and have a higher target. Maybe Bob is appreciating his portfolio versus staying status quo here with his withdrawals that he's taking to get that $80,000. What we want to do for Bob, though, is answer the question ultimately of, hey, do you have enough money with your risk tolerance to retire, or is this a problem? And here's where I'll do a present value calculation for you. Bob's present value of his portfolio is $1.3 million. Worst case scenario, if Bob never took Social Security, okay, so hear me out on this one. Bob gets Social Security 5 years after turning age 57 if he takes it early at 62. Bob needs $7,000 regardless of where he gets his income. $7,000 a month is $84,000. When you factor taxes into that $84,000, it's $103,000 a year. So let's imagine that Bob, not factoring Social Security in, we're talking worst case scenario here, and factoring taxes in, was taking $103,000 a year out of his portfolio of $1.3 million. And Bob was able to earn 5% per year on that money. And we want to know, how long will it take Bob's future value of his accounts to hit 0? We're solving for the number of years this portfolio will last. $1.3 million today, 5% interest earnings annually, $103,000 a year coming out, 0 future value. Bob's portfolio at that rate would last 20 years, okay? Bob's got a tough decision to make here. After factoring in taxes, after factoring in his risk tolerance and what he's able to do there, after factoring in his goals for his money, even though he wants to spend it down himself, the longevity under a present value, future value calculation, my advice to someone like Bob would be, if you're ready to retire, it's plausible or possible that we could make it work, but it's going to be tight. If you're willing to work a few more short years, just 1, 2, 3, 4 more years can make a world of difference in the world of compound interest. You've got a portfolio that has amassed 1.3 million. Let's imagine through conversation that I convinced Bob that if he just works 5 more years that we can make this work and we can make it work easily. And let me show you how that would work. Bob's present value of his portfolio is 1.3 million, as we said. Difference here now though is Bob's been able to add to his portfolio on a pretty good clip all these last couple of years. And on average, he's pumping $20,000 a year into his retirement savings every single year. He's got 5 more years of work in him before he absolutely wants to be done. He wants to know if he averages 5% interest on his money during these additional 5 years, what will the future value of his retirement portfolio be when he gets to that age 62, which consequently is the earliest age he can claim his Social Security paycheck from. So let's run it. 1.3 million today. We've got $20,000 a year, this time going into the portfolio, not coming out of the portfolio. 5-year run, 5% interest being earned. Bob's future value in just those 5 years balloons to $1,769,000 and change. Pretty cool, just 5 years. Rerun this scenario now. We talked about a worst case of including taxes and not having Social Security and all these other items. If Bob wanted to take $103,000 out of his portfolio annually, could he do that? He couldn't do it necessarily without having a worry of running out of money with 1.3 million. Can he do it with 1.769? 103,000 divided by 1,769,000 is a 5.8% rate of annual withdrawal. Still a little high for the average liking of some scholars and professors. But if Bob's portfolio of $1,769,000 today makes just 5% per year, and he takes $103,000 a year out in withdrawals, his portfolio now, instead of only lasting 20 years, lasts 40. Bob has a pretty good feeling that he's not going to live past age 97. Certainly Bob doesn't know, none of us know when we're gonna live, but he feels much more comfortable with the age 97 running out of money than he did the age 77. So in this case, you can see an example of how we factored in, without going through specific strategy or specific investment advice, as to what he should put his money into, because that's the next step in our process. Does Bob have enough money to retire at age 57 with 1.3 million? I'd say it's pretty tight. He could make that decision, and we'd have to do some very proactive planning, and we'd have to be very careful with what Bob did, and he might work out for him. But my advice to Bob would likely be, hey, even if it's just a couple more years, you're probably gonna be in a much better position at that point in time. If you liked today's video and you want to see more specific examples just like this one, drop your comment in the comments below. You could give me your specific example and we'll see if I can go through it on an upcoming video. If you want to take it one step further, certain types of financial advisors will help you with the type of planning that we did here today. So how to hire the right financial advisor. It's a guide that we have. It's free. It's downloadable. See the link in the description for how to get your hands on to that. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Turn your notifications on. We'll see you next time.